Salvation is a word we use a lot in church, but not so much in today's world. Jesus' name literally means God saves. But what exactly are we being saved from? Often what comes to mind is that Jesus saves us from eternal death in hell after we die. But God's view of salvation is much bigger than that. Salvation is so much more than what happens after we die. It is salvation while we live, and it affects every area of our lives. Pastor, theologian and friend of mine, Megan Good, defines it this way. Salvation is the setting right of all things on earth as it is in heaven. It's a comprehensive rescue of humanity and all creation from everything that distorts its design. Put simply, it's a place where God's will gets done. I think one of the best ways to think about salvation is by taking a look at one church denomination that named itself after the concept, the Salvation Army. You may know of their work that started in the roughest parts of 19th century England and today operates in 134 countries of the world. When you read their story and see what their founders William and Catherine Booth did, you'll see that they had this kind of holistic definition of salvation in mind. It started, of course, with spiritual salvation. William Booth himself was a preacher in the traditional church, and he would conduct open-air meetings and he would preach on the streets, and later on they gathered bands and tambourines and parades that caused a lot of ruckus in local towns. But people would listen to the message and they would get saved. But William Booth also acknowledged that salvation was much more than salvation of the spirit. And they started to engage in all sorts of other forms of rescue mission. First of all, looking out for the drunks and homeless on the streets, providing shelter and clothing them. Then working on developing an employment agency, finding jobs for those who had none. Then they helped to save those young girls who were involved in sex trafficking, and they advocated to change the law. They helped save those who were struggling with disability, and they started a deaf and dumb ministry. They helped the elderly, and they set up initiatives for retirement funding. They helped those who were missing and set up a missing persons bureau. They provided salvation for those who were struggling in the legal courts, providing legal aid. They helped save those who were struggling as victims of disaster, and they set up a search and rescue service. They helped those who were working in unsafe industries. One of my favourite stories is of the Matchbox factory, where they heard about this production line that was producing a chemical, phosphorus, that was actually causing people, the workers, to be sick so that they would eventually die. They set up an alternative Matchbox factory where there was a healthy system of industry. Then they advocated to change the law. They understood that salvation involved every part of ourselves, spiritual, physical, emotional, and then they set out to join that mission. In William's words, this is the way we grew. We saw the need. We saw the people starving. We saw people going about half naked, people doing sweated labour. And we set about bringing a remedy for things. We were obliged. There was a compulsion. How could we do anything else? They called themselves the Salvation Army. And there was a reason for that, because they recognized what they were helping to save people from. They agreed with Paul's words in Ephesians 6 that says that our wrestle is not with flesh and blood, but with the powers of darkness, the spiritual forces of evil that seek to destroy God's earth and the people in it. And so they became a part of God's salvation mission, God's salvation rescue army that worked together to fight and to overcome the difficult barriers that evil brought. It's the same rescue mission that we've all been called into. Jesus said that he came to save the lost. And as we ourselves experience his salvation, we too are called into that army to help bring salvation from heaven to earth. Thanks so much for joining us today. To have your own God conversation, go to godconversations.com.